Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've seen American Animals, which is a heist film, mainly narrative drama, but elements of documentary. Mm-hmm. A British-American co-production. The writer-director is British, and was a documentary maker before this. He made a film called The Imposter,
which I've seen.
You've seen. I haven't. But it's very, very well regarded, The Imposter. It's a French guy who cons his way into America by taking the identity of this missing kid.
That's right.
Yeah. So I've not seen that, but yes. People like it a lot.
No, it was very interesting. It was really great, actually. It was kind of, fascinating in terms of these questions of identity and self-presentation and legal presentation and, kind of desires of being. And the film kind of slipped through, things remained indeterminate until the end. Yeah, there were all these doubts. So there were doubts at the beginning, but there was also this wish for this person to be who he said he was, and those conflicting things kind of made for a narrative that kind of seemed to slightly change as it unfolded, in which this has some similarities with this.
Right. Well, I want to see The Imposter. I have wanted to see it for a little while, but I've forgotten about it. The director in question is Bart Layton. This is based on a true story. Well, it's quite funny. The film starts off in a very playful way. It says on screen, "This is not based on a true story," and then it blanks out a few words, and so it says, "This is a true story."
Yeah.
And it plays with your expectations quite a bit early on, because then it cuts to a load of footage of from out of a car window looking at the side of a road as you drive past, but it's all upside down.
Yes.
So you're going, "Ooh, what's going on here?"
Yes. I thought that was a very interesting way of beginning, because, you're watching these images upside down, and yet they're very composed and beautiful, and and I was thinking, oh, how interesting it is to make something strange like that and make you look at it in a new way. Yes. I thought that was an interesting way of beginning.
I thought it was a fantastic way of beginning, and as the film went on, it felt more and more superficial to me. But let's just quickly say what it's about before we get into talking about that sort of thing. It's a true story, theoretically, of these four guys who were three of whom were students at Transylvania University in Kentucky, and one of whom was their mate who, actually no, he was a student as well. He was on a scholarship there. Sorry, four students who are at Transylvania University.
Yes.
And at Transylvania University is a library where a number of rare and old, valuable books are kept. Guarded by just one librarian, this woman, BJ. Her real name, her full name is Betty Jean Gooch, played by Ann Dowd, who is in Hereditary and she's in Handmaid's Tale. She's really good. The one kid played by Barry Keoghan, who I've previously mispronounced as Barry Keoghan. He's Irish. His name's Barry Keoghan. He was in Dunkirk, and he's in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which we both found interesting.
Yes.
And he's great. He's really idiosyncratic sort of presence on screen. He's very memorable.
Yes. He's got very sad eyes. There seems to be very sad eyes that there seems to be something behind them. It's just he's got a very interesting kind of sad, pensive look. Yeah.
He's an art student, and on a tour of the library with his class, he's really taken by this enormous tome, which is the Birds of America by John James Audubon, who's famous for being the founder of the Audubon Society, or is he the founder or is it named after him? Either way,
yeah.
The Audubon Society is about the Birds of America, which is the book that he went out into the kind of wilderness and painted all of these birds, and it was a foundational sort of art and kind of natural history text. And they have a copy of it, and it's incredibly rare. He mentions this to his mate Warren, who's the guy on the sports scholarship, who's a bit of a waster. They sort of discover that one of these is worth $12 million, and they start hatching a plan, very vaguely, sort of semi-seriously, to steal the thing. It becomes more and more serious as time goes on. You're never quite sure exactly how sort of one of the things the film's playing with is how much they are playing and how much they really mean it, because there's a lot of imagining that they're going to do a perfect Ocean's 11 heist, and they play one in the film. They play this single take, beautifully sort of orchestrated thing where we're going to go in here, we're going to take out the librarian, we're going to pick up the books, we're going to do this and that, all in one shot to Elvis' Little Less Conversation.
Yeah.
You know? So, and then of course...
That's a great bit.
There's the imagination, then there's the reality, and these things come into conflict.
It's worth saying that, you know, they make a comment about how nobody offers a guide to heists. There's no how-to book, but actually there are dozens of films, right? And they kind of, you know, they show us all
they work their way through a load of heist movies.
Yeah.
And this is a major kind of theme of the film.
Yeah.
Is kind of media and media influence on them. So that's what we'll say before getting into spoilers. But if you are aware of the real life story, this is a spoiler. Then you will be aware that it didn't really come off. Well, it didn't come off.
It didn't come off.
And they ended up going to jail for 7 years.
Yes.
They managed to make their way into the stairwell with a couple of books and then dropped them and ran. Yes. And the books have made their way back into the possession of the library, and it's fine. They've been to jail, and the film catches you up at the end with where they are these days.
Yes.
And the film uses it while it plays a pretty straight drama with actors portraying the characters. It also has talking heads with
the real
people describing their memories of what was happening.
Yes. And I thought that was one of the interesting things about the film, and also I thought it was one of the lacks or one of the faults, because I had this very weird thing where all of the real life people seemed to me to be much more interesting and charismatic than the actors playing them.
Okay.
You know, particularly the two leads, actually. I thought that the real... what's his name? The person who Barry Keoghan played.
Spencer Reinhardt.
I thought, you know, he seemed much more interesting than the character that Barry Keoghan was presenting to us. You know, much more thoughtful and articulate and pensive, you know, and also, you know, with a very interesting look of his own. And likewise, the athlete jock who, you know, is the one who's the driving force behind it.
Warren Lipka, played by Evan Peters.
Yes, I thought Warren Lipka was, you know, kind of had a much more interesting look and, you know, came alive on screen much more vividly than Evan Peters. First
thing I had to do was check whether they were actors or not, because I wondered if that was another layer of kind of performance. I didn't know if they were actors as it turned, because I thought, especially those two, I thought they seem so accustomed to performing and being on screen that it doesn't quite make sense that they are not performers.
Exactly. Well, and to me, they just were more interesting looking. And what they were conveying was much more interesting than the actors playing them. So I thought immediately that's a flaw with the film.
I think the film is kind of two films taken together, and I don't think successfully. I think there is a version of the film which is a straight documentary done with these guys telling their story, and there's a version which is a straight drama played by actors.
Yes.
The film combines the two, and I think it's unsuccessful because I don't think one sheds light on the other successfully at all. And I think this is what I mean by superficial. I think it is a pointless exercise.
Yes, I think it's meant to shed light, because obviously, you know, on the one hand you have the real events, on the one hand you have the fictionalized events. Point of view is underlined in each of those moments, so it's this person's version of events, that person's version of events, the film's version of events, and the film's version from this point of view, and the film's version. But actually, I do think that it's kind of a formal game that doesn't add much. I agree with you on that.
The film, before the film gets to the real heist, there's a failed heist before that. Before the film gets to the real heist, though, which is where things get quite serious and quite real, it's doing an awful lot of this kind of formal gamesmanship of going back and forth between who remembers what. There's a tension between what Warren remembers and what Spencer remembers, and it's done through They were meeting a guy in New York,
Yes.
and he says he had a blue scarf, or was it purple? And on screen, you see the guy meeting, and the scarf changes colour from blue to purple.
Right.
And then he goes, no, actually, the other guy goes, no, actually, it was an old guy with white hair, and so the footage that you've seen rewinds, and the guy you've seen is now replaced with this old guy.
Yeah. So
And it makes for jokes quite a lot of the time, and there is wit to it, but the sort of what it's going for in terms of what the truth is of the story, and making us question how much of this is true and where the truth kind of lies. It felt like it didn't illuminate anything to me. That wasn't really what was interesting about the film.
Well, the film sets up
But
the
it insists on
themes quite clearly at the beginning. So it begins kind of with two images, quotes, right? So on the one hand, it shows us the John James Audubon book, right? And then it also starts with this quotation. Is it from Adam Smith?
It's from Darwin.
Oh, it's from Darwin, right?
On the Origin of Species. Yeah. It's a quote along the lines of, American animals must have migrated and blah, 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 something about living in caves in Kentucky.
Right. So, so those are the two things that kind of bound the film. And in a way, kind of the search that it sets you out, or the kind of the main narrative thoroughfare, is obviously one about kind of American masculinity, as illustrated by these four men in this place, and they're all middle class, they're all kind of,
Yeah, it's a very specific American masculinity because it's white and middle class.
And educated.
And educated.
Right.
The one guy in particular, Warren, I thought he was a dropout until that scene where he's in the principal's office or whatever he is, saying, and he says, "You're here on a sports scholarship. I never see you doing any sport, but you're here on a scholarship." So that's, so he's got this level of privilege, probably beyond the others, who you have no idea whether they're on scholarships or not, but he definitely is. And he's abusing it and wasting it and doesn't want it to be there.
They're all from the same background, yeah. So they're all kind of middle class, from middle class to a little bit more than that, because one of the characters in the film, who's the bodybuilder and who's always doing exercises and who ends up later, having become a personal fitness instructor, writing a book on, personal fitness in jail, right? You're told that he's always on the make and he's making money and he's like a yuppie go-getter.
Young entrepreneur.
Yeah, young entrepreneur. So that's the background. And I think it's important, really, because, in the present American context, these are all kind of very privileged people. And on the other hand, kind of what they find is that the life that they're leading is not the life that they feel was promised to them. And, the film has a line at the end, which I think is very banal, saying, you're constantly told you're special and wonderful, and then you realize basically, that you're not. And so, this whole heist is a way of kind of making their life more interesting and kind of more vivid and, having an extraordinary and transformative experience, really. And of course, kind of what's interesting about it is that they see a transformative and exciting experience as only a criminal one, right? If you can imagine all kinds of things that one can do, to have kind of a transformative experience. I mean, there are a million things that one can imagine from doing that. And in other generations, for example, it would have been to go fight in the Civil War in Spain, or to join the Communist Party, or to travel the world, or or to set up a library. I mean, there were historically there have been many history is full of kind of people imagining transformative experiences in their lives that involve contributing to society. This is purely about robbing.
Well,
so and I think the film is making a comment on that.
Do you think it's about robbing, or do you think it's about trying to be those heist guys from those cool movies? There's a whole thing about naming themselves after the Reservoir Dogs characters.
Yes, there is. So, I think to me those two elements go together. Yeah. So one, but it's an interesting commentary on the limited scope of what one conceives of as a transformative experience. That in fact it is revolving around money. So, for example, if they just kind of wanted to have an experience like that, they could have done it in a million other. They could have robbed something for the sake of robbing. Yeah. So actually, I think the money is a factor in all of this. It is a kind of a get-rich-quick scheme. The fact you're constantly told that the book is worth $12 million, right? So I think the money.
There's that question of imagining what will you do with the money.
That's right. So the money's central, and actually it's yeah. So there's a thing about rebellion, right? There's a thing about crime. Like if you read On the Road and so on, like those 1950s kind of rebel books, kind of, they're always on the road. They're always involved in petty thefts. They refuse to do what society tells them to do, right? Yeah, but actually, kind of, being anti America's success narrative is partly what they stand for. So I think this is very much also about the money. It's almost like the only thing that people can conceive of as transforming their life is actually money, and getting it quick enough so that actually you enjoy it young enough so that it does transform your life.
Having said that, when the question comes up of what will you do with the money, there's basically no answer given.
Yes.
It's not a question that the film wants to answer, not a question that it lets them answer, or that they even seem to want to. The one time that they talk to any extent about what they would do with the money is when Warren basically says, "I want to go and be on a boat in the Caribbean like Red and Andy from Shawshank Redemption."
Yes.
So again, it's sort of living his fantasy of a film thing. That's it. But there's actually it's about the act of the taking. It's not about how that will transform my life after that, I think.
Well, they haven't thought that through very much, but the money is crucial, because for example,
but it is the act, I think, rather than.
Well, but no, I want to make a distinction because, for example, the whole beginning of the Thomas Crown affair, is actually, him robbing the museum, right? And nobody being aware. So that's the act, that's the thrill of it, is the robbery, But in this film, it's not about that. So, for example, they could have, taken the books and returned them. No, they want the books, they want the money.
Yes, but I get that. But I think, it's the fact that the film pays so little attention. It brings up that question of what will we do after, and then drops it.
Yes.
That I think is important, because actually what it gets at is, it is the thrill of the act, but in this case it's not even the thrill of the act, it's the thrill of imagining the act, because actually when it gets real, it gets very dark, and they do not want to do it. Particularly the whole thing about incapacitating the librarian, that none of them wants to do that, and Warren very reluctantly says, okay, I'm going to be the one to do it, when everyone else turns it down, and then he doesn't want to do it.
Well, it's clear, the way that the film tells us, that none of these, that they're just kids, and that none of them actually are hard enough or have the mentality or, to actually carry the thing forward. And it's the momentum really that kind of makes them carry the thing forward.
Yeah.
But actually, I still think it's very significant that this is the thing that they imagine. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Like, it is different to going to, sort of 7-Eleven and robbing some sweets. Clearly, the magnitude of what they're robbing is part of it.
Or to go to Skid Row and set up a soup kitchen, which, could be dangerous and transformative. There's a million things one can do, to kind of transform one's life that involve danger and risk and whatever. So, I think the fact that this is a robbery and that it is about money, to me, is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I'm agreeing with you. But like I say, I think the subtlety is that when it gets real, the thrill goes.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
When it gets real, and they are stuck in the middle of this, screwing up this heist, no one is enjoying it.
No, but on the other hand, if you remember, it happens twice. So they screw it up the first time, and they return the next day to do it
because Warren makes it happen. Because you have the whole thing of when they leave, having said we're going to abort this because there's more librarians and we can't do this. Spencer, the real life Spencer, in his memory, thinking back, says it was such a relief and such a thrill to have got out of there having done nothing wrong.
Yes.
And he's forced back into it by Warren, as are the other two.
Well, yes, but yes and no. I'm trying to make a point here because
Yeah.
the thing is that they try it once, and so I don't want to absolve them of it,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't want to just say, then kind of circumstances took over, because there's an element of not only so in legal terms they planned it, right? So I was premeditated, and part of the sign of that is that they did it once and it didn't work. And, they all returned the next day. Now, yes, one person is shown to be kind of the leader or whatever, but, everybody else turned up. Mm-hmm. So, and I just kind of want to underline that, because I do think that it's kind of, so the film is about American animals. It's about kind of American masculinity at the moment, and what kind of choices this country and this culture is offering these young men. And then kind of putting that in tension with what these various young men feel that their choices are, then I think it's very interesting, because actually the choices are shown to be very limited, even in a very privileged milieu.
Well, the choices are shown to be limited as far as what they imagine their choices are.
That's right.
Actually, what the real choices that they have are is, it's not really shown, because everything is really shown through their eyes. But for instance, as we say, Warren is on a sports scholarship. He can be making a lot of that. He's deliberately tossing it aside.
That's right.
So he doesn't, whether he sees that as an opportunity or not, it's certainly something that he doesn't want to take up. And he talks about the entire the scholarship and the school and the town and everything around him, and his dad being a disappointment, which is very kind of, it's quite petulant, sort of childish acting out.
No, I actually, I mean, it is a petulant, childish acting out. On the other hand, I think I understood it. His whole life has been structured by his father, so that he could get this scholarship that he doesn't even want.
Yeah.
Right? So his life is rendered meaningless, or he sees his life as meaningless. He's been working all his life for something he doesn't want.
Yeah.
Just because of, the social convention and the history and the father's prodding. So I think that's kind of like an interesting moment in the film.
There's something then that I want to pick up on, which I think will lead us down the right path.
The right path.
Well, a fruitful path. Which is what you said about what Warren says towards the end of the film, about thinking that your life's going to be special, being told that your life's going to be special, and then it's not, because that seems to me a direct reference to Fight Club, where Tyler Durden says more or less the same thing. There's a speech in the middle of it where he says something like, we're told we're going to be movie stars and sports stars and fuck the prom queen, but we're not, and we're slowly learning that fact. There's a whole thing, and of course one of the things that's complicated about Fight Club is that Tyler Durden is played by Brad Pitt in the height of his sort of sexual sort of sexiness, sexual peak, and he's the guy who Edward Norton's character wants to be. So that's a kind of undercurrent to, and that whole film is about American masculinity at the time. Again, kind of seeing a version of it, and again it's a very white middle class version where men are feeling sort of inadequate or lied to or disappointed about what they thought their lives were going to be, and I think in this film the way that reference, and I think it is a reference, comes down to it's saying something similar, but it's also about the fact that Warren is thinking about this through a movie that he's seen.
Yes,
that is an icon of masculinity of the time.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's no question that all of these young men's desires are mediated, right? And they're particularly mediated through movies. And actually, so again, to go back to the limits or how limited their wishes and desires are, that's also my point, really. That kind of, well, one of the arguments about movies, one of the arguments that the Frankfurt School kind of used to make is that mass culture tells you what you want, and then it offers to you, but it kind of, so that you feel you live in the best of all possible worlds. But actually, the what it offers you, the wants that it creates, are very limited, and they're very limited to only those which the society can offer. Now, what this film presents is the creation of a very limited set of wants. But then it also shows the society that can't fulfill them, right? So, there's a breakdown in that. So I think the movie references throughout the film are very interesting ones, because you know, a lot of them are about heist. There's the Kubrick film, there's the reference to Tarantino. You know, we see the shelf of videos, Rififi and the Thomas Crown Affair, and you know, all of the famous heist films, right? So really, it is all about kind of transforming your life by stealing, right? By kind of creating the perfect heist in which you can run away with the money and which no one gets caught. But so, you know, it's kind of, it is a critique of American culture and American masculinity, that those sets are so limited. And I just want to bring up 2 points that then, you know, you can run off with. One of the things that struck me was the whole beginning sequence with the fraternities, right?
The hazing.
So the hazing, and basically it all revolves around drinking and, you know, pretending to give blowjobs to other men by drinking beer through, you know, a funnel in their crotch and things like that, right? So, you know, there's that whole aspect to the film. And then the other one is that we don't see any of these young men with women, right? So the women are all like their mothers, or the main character is really the librarian, which is, you know, so this is also in some ways, you know, a film about, you know, like male friendship and male rituals and, yeah, male identity. But again, you know, very interestingly and very unusually, I think in American cinema, divorced from sex. Yeah, like there's no.
Yeah, well, these guys aren't having it.
They're not having any. Yeah.
As far as
but also they don't wish for any. It's not like in their minds or dreams, or you don't see any of it really.
Well, the one that you can imagine having some sex is the rich one, the guy who works out and all that, who's brought in basically because he has money.
Yeah.
But it's not something that the film brings up at all. You see, but the point is that he's the only one you can imagine. Like it's not really a part of the other one's lives. They are sort of, you know, like classic modern male shut-ins, nerds,
yes,
guys who hang out on PlayStations. With that said, they kind of, I mean, you don't see any of that either. To be fair, I guess they have, they're watching all those DVDs, but you know, the Spencer's an artist and he sits at home and paints.
Yeah, and you see a lot of his work,
and he's very good.
Yes.
So there's which is not quite something like that's a productive thing. You know, which is not exactly something that you'd associate with that image of sterile sort of masculinity. He's doing something, yes, and he has some aspiration.
Yes.
Creatively. Yeah. But you're right. There's no. I mean, another point of reference, I think, is the Social Network, which I think is also particularly echoed in the fitness character. He's rowing, which is a like really iconic thing from Social Network, because you got the Winklevosses, who are Olympic rowers, and there's that whole thing about he's the entrepreneur, which again, the Social Network was all about these guys at Harvard making money for themselves and trading on stocks and stuff, and I think it's echoed in him, and in Social Network, there is a little bit of sex where they get blowjobs in the bathroom when they realise that Facebook's becoming kind of popular on campus, and apart from that, women again really aren't in that film. It's about these clashes between men and well, boys really, kind of this thing about young boys having lots of money.
But in the Social Network, I think, you know, there is a lot of
there are more women, but it's about how they're
more women, but
it's about how they're excluded. There's that one line where they're assigning jobs to everyone. They're saying, you'll do this and you'll do that and you'll get 5% and you'll get 10%.
No, but
then the girls are there going, can we do anything? And he goes, no.
But the point is that a lot of the Social Network is driven by a desire for sex. They're not getting any. They want it. You know, kind of the whole thing about designing Facebook is actually, you know, about sex in a way.
Yeah.
So the thing is that in this film, it doesn't even come up as an issue.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, they never even say, oh, I want to fuck, or nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so, which is very unusual when you're talking about 20-year-old young men talking with each other. Right? So I just thought that, you know, that this is a very interesting facet about the film. It makes it very unusual for me.
You don't even see them watching porn, which you would think that would be the other side of it. Like the one side of it is that we're not talking to women, but then that would be faced up by the fact we're watching porn all the time.
Yes.
But there's none of that either. Like there's really no sex drive in these guys.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
You know. So it really is. It's a desire for transformation, for change. Yeah, and the only opportunity for transformation and change that these young men can imagine is robbing, which I do think is interesting.
I think
and there's a lot of robbing and different types of robbing in the film.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing about transformation, while it's there, is more. It's slightly really expressed through lip service. Like, people talk about it, but as far as it's expressed through action, I'm not quite convinced, because I think it is about boredom and doing something to kind of break out of that boredom and try and transgress the rules that have been put in place for them, that kind of thing. But as far as kind of transforming themselves in a long term way, like I say, it feels like lip service to me in the film rather than something that is really, really carried through. Yeah. Something that really matters to them.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of. So let me just say how I felt through most of the film.
Yeah.
To begin with, because I think, I didn't find the film. I'd heard very good things about it. I mean, not through having read any reviews or anything, but just, from Twitter and so on, you got the feeling that this is going to be like an extraordinary film. I didn't find it to be so,
no.
Right? And there was a period in which I was really quite bored. Really, I kind of, and kind of wanting it to end, And then when you get to the sentencing, I thought, oh my God, they actually did the 7 years. That's so harsh. Yeah, you think, yeah, because I mean, they robbed some books, and then they only robbed a few, and they didn't even sell it.
They seemed pretty repentant, or at least
and they seemed very repentant. So I thought, my God, what a harsh sentence, especially considering that white cops killing black people get off the hook, or rapists get off the hook. So to have stolen a couple of books in the library, and even though they were very valuable, and to get such a harsh sentence,
and to have done what they did to the librarian, to be fair, that was quite hard.
That was quite hard, but they didn't threaten her life. They
may have done. I mean, they did attack her with a taser, and they don't. You don't know.
Well, we didn't see that, right? So I thought.
Yeah, you did. You saw him go in her neck with a taser.
No, the threatening, the life.
Oh, as in like verbally threatening.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah.
So her life.
No, they didn't.
From what we saw, was never at risk or anything. So I thought the sentencing was harsh, right? And then you get the wrap up at the end, where they tell you, this film was actually written by one of the four people, right? And then the other person is studying to be a filmmaker, and the other person is a fitness instructor in LA, and then you get to the artist, right? And I thought, so basically, actually, that robbery did transform everybody's life in the way that they wanted to. Like, at least one of them got a movie out of it. Really? Yeah.
Well, it's speaking about that particularly, it is the manuscript, a manuscript called American Animals, a memoir, is shown on the desk of that character. But the writer credited for the film is Bart Layton, the director.
Okay, well, maybe...
So, I don't know about actually...
So maybe he only got a book out of it. The implication is that one of them wrote a book of which this is the film, right? And the other one is studying to be a filmmaker. And... and it kind of changed my view of the film, because in a way, so on the one hand, there's a whole critique of this, right? Of, people who want an easy fix, and, who want like instant money and celebrity and so on. And really, on the other hand, the film says, well, yes, now these characters have spent 7 years in jail or whatever, but kind of, they are now in this other world, which is not a terrible world, And actually one very close to celebrity and filmmaking, and
Do you think the film is self-regarding?
I do.
I think it's very consciously playing on Reservoir Dogs as an iconic heist movie, about clashes of masculinity and portraying a kind of American masculinity of the time. And this is kind of parodying or pastiching that, basically taking, I was 1990, 1991, 92, Reservoir Dogs, and kind of with the characters, use it like you're saying they're Mr. Pink, Mr. Yellow, Mr. Green, Mr. something else, Mr. Black, And of course, they say like we don't need these names because the whole point in Reservoir Dogs was that they didn't know each other's names, and that's what kept them from sharing their names. So they are playing, basically playing sort of dress up.
Yes.
But I think the film is kind of it is quite consciously trying to be an update in a way, to say that was an American masculinity back then and this is an American masculinity now, and which I think is fine, but then the sort of implication of, and that film is a classic and so will this film be.
Yes. Well, I think it's trying to do, and some people have been receiving it as such, but I think No Cigar to me it doesn't live up to any of that. And I think the major fault in that is that you don't get a kind of complex representation of who these young men are. Like, there's no yearning in any of them for anything. Like, so you get the sense that they're kind of a bit dweeby and, like in their basement doing their thing. For one it's art, for the other one it's chess or whatever. But actually, you don't get a sense of a yearning of what would they like their lives to be, really, if they could have control over that. Yeah.
I think that is kind of the point. I think that's actually one of the more interesting things about the film, that there's a going through the motions aspect. I mean, if you think about the way that people go to university these days, they do it on, like, university used to be the thing that you might do after school if you were very smart or very privileged, or kind of saw the value in it. And these days, it's the thing you do next that everyone does. And you go there, and it's basically a 3-year holiday camp where you drink for a lot of people. And so these days, there's like a more going through the motions thing about university, where it's just the next stage. And that's kind of where these guys are in a way, although it's slightly different in America because debt is so much worse than it is here. Nonetheless, everyone kind of ends up taking it on.
But that doesn't...
The fact that there is no... aspiration in the
to me that shows a kind of a lack of understanding in the part of the filmmakers of what it is to be human. Because to say that you don't want to be at universities, for example, we know that one of the young men, his father has planned his whole life for him. His father has structured his whole youth so that he could win a scholarship to go to university, and that's not what he wants, right? But what does he want?
Well, exactly.
What does he long for?
But that I think is the...
It can't be nothing. But
I don't know. I mean, that is kind of what actually rings kind of true to me.
Well, it doesn't ring true to me. I mean, and it shows a lack of understanding, because we all yearn for something. We all, even if you're stuck in your basement and you don't know what to do with your life and you're playing video games all day long, to me that speaks of wanting something else that maybe you feel you can't have, that you might actually very well construct for yourself, but to show kind of all of these young men without any real desire for anything, and actually it's the suggestion is not that they don't have anything, they're not suicidal, it's actually just the film is not showing it to you, and I think that's a problem.
I don't think it is. I think it's actually, like I say, it rings true to me as a portrayal of what young guys in their sort of situation, how they feel. Like, even though they have things on a plate for them and they have all these things they could be doing, they don't feel it and they don't care. And probably the more that things are laid out for them, the less they want to take part in it, because they it's this kind of natural rebellion aspect to that, which you see in Warren, throwing the scholarship away. Like, I get what you mean. Like, people kind of want things, but even if they do, they don't know how to express them, and they are going through the motions.
I'm not even talking about things,
No, I don't mean things material, but I mean, something in their life.
I just don't believe that. I think, first of all, I can't imagine young men now wanting sex. So, that's a drive, and then a kind of, everybody finds an outlet in something, like in music or... there's always a kind of, something that people want, and, people are complex and they have very different kinds of desires and wants, and the film kind of shows none of that. So it's one thing to say that, you are in this university and it's not your choice and really kind of you don't want to be doing it. But what else would you like to be doing?
But I think it's not about not wanting anything. It's about not knowing what they want or not knowing how to express it, which is why they end up just acting out, doing this robbery that also they don't really want.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. They don't really want it because once it becomes real, they realise that this, even though they carry on with it because there's this momentum and what else are they going to do, there's this frustration, but they don't really want it. Like, it has become real all of a sudden, and the thing that they were playing with is no longer fun, no longer kind of entertaining or a kind of a diversion. I like I said, I think that not accepting the, I think it's a premise the film is putting out that they are in a position where they don't know what they want or they don't know how to express what they want, and they are acting out. And I think not accepting that is possibly true of a lot of people is just, it's like a clash between you and the film rather than the film failing.
Well, I think it's the film failing. You know, so for example, we get the Barry Keoghan character. You know, we get to see that, you know, he wants to be an artist, and he keeps drawing things, and at the end, you know, he draws the bird, right? So, you know, he wants to be an artist, and there is something that he wants to express and that he's expressing, and that, you know, so he's got kind of like an inner life. So there's kind of like a desire that clashes with, you know, that which we see him doing, which, you know, you get the feeling that he's kind of, you know, drawn to. And actually, one of the things that I think the film could have shown better, it tells you, but it could have shown better, because you get the feeling that actually what these boys enjoy the most is actually the kind of the camaraderie. So, you know, they say they don't even like some of the people, but they call them in, and then they're spending all of these hours. And so, you know, one of the things that struck me was when you see the model of the library, right? Like how much work and care and and the pleasure in all of that, and the pleasure in sharing all of that.
Yeah.
You know, so I think kind of the film to me is unsatisfactory in that it ascribes, you know, a shallowness to these young men that I think is not quite there. That, you know, well, I just can't conceive of people that way. Well, so that's me. The
model is interesting. The model is clearly built by Barry Keoghan's character. And also, as you said, a lot of care's gone into it, and he's saying, you know, don't touch. When Warren, you know, tries to move things around in it, and there is a very clear undercurrent. Well, it's not even an undercurrent. It's just what Barry Keoghan's character is very, very reluctant. All throughout, he really is in Warren's wake. You know, being carried along by him. He's not the one making any of these decisions, and he's the one who is thrilled when the heist doesn't come off the first time.
Yes.
And he seems to be the one with the most kind of real aspiration and the most idea of actually what he wants to do with his life as well, with his art.
I think the characters are not very well defined or drawn out. So on the one hand, you're also told, like, that basically there are two slackers and two real keynotes. So, you know, the slacker is the athlete, and then the Barry Keoghan character is meant to be someone who smokes grass all the time. You know, but actually you're told that, but you don't see him acting that way, and actually I don't even think you see him doing it.
I didn't.
You know, so, you know, and then the other two.
I didn't think of him as a stoner in the film.
Well, he's meant to be. You know, so I mean I think that's part of the problem. Anyway, we're probably kind of losing sight of the forest for the trees, really.
Well, maybe not. I mean, like I said, I think I didn't really like the film when I was watching it.
Yes, I didn't.
And there was a long section where I was getting pretty bored when the initial kind of playfulness of the form, it ran its course very, very quickly, and it felt like it wore off to me, and the stuff about bringing in the real people to tell sort of sides of the story, and then the actors playing the drama, and also the stuff about truth and different versions of the story, I felt was completely pointless, and I didn't like it at all. And it felt very like that was so superficial, and I really think it is. So that wore off very, very quickly, and it was once they got to the heist, the second time, and like I say, kind of shit got real, and it really dropped all of the frivolity. Because you notice how like when they do the heist the second time,
Yes.
and they actually get to attacking the librarian and that, all of that playfulness goes. It is played purely straight.
Yes.
Because, which is a great decision, because that would have just ruined it. And I think so. I was getting very, very bored until it dropped the act. You know what I mean? But all that to say that while I really didn't enjoy the film while I was watching it, and I got kind of grumpy, I think in talking about it, I think it is portraying an observation of young masculinity, young white privileged masculinity, that I think, although you disagree with it because you just can't conceive of people being that way, I think a lot of people actually are. That's what the film is portraying.
Okay, well, we have a difference of opinion on that. And actually, my thought is, I wonder if the director had been making a film about, 4 young men in Essex or whatever, if he would have conceived of them as so unidimensional. It's kind of an issue that I'm increasingly kind of remarking on films that are set in North America, that I think there's not enough insight into what young men's lives might be in Lexington, Kentucky.
There's a version of this film that is better on all of that. There is a version of this film that is better because I think the frivolity and the playing around with memory and history, I think just get rid of that and concentrate on the other stuff, because the other stuff is a lot better. And
there's an interesting story.
It's very
here.
easy to say that, but you know what I mean.
Well, no, but I agree with you. I mean, I think there's an interesting story here, and I think actually the formal games and trying to make it more interesting by changing the point of view, by kind of putting into play the fictional world, with the real characters. I think there are things that actually detract rather than enhance the story. So
I agree.
I think there's very much that. One more thing, what did you make of the music? The use of the music, the soundtrack. There's
3 instances that I remember. There's the opening where the music it's that very weird sort of montage opening. You've got the close-ups from the Audubon book, and you've got the upside down footage, and the music's kind of going dum dum dum. There's some. It's. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's kind of you notice the music, and it's basically making you ask, like, what the hell is this? What am I seeing? Which what can I say other than I like that? Like, I liked the way it was creating something really sort of the openness of possibility of what the film was going to be. I enjoyed. Then there was the Oceans type montage where they were imagining the heist, and it was set to Elvis. Conversation. I think was it the Junkie XL remix? I can't remember.
I don't know, but a little less conversation.
Which was great, and it was that perfect expression of this is exactly what we would imagine our lives being in a perfect world sort of thing, and them imagining themselves in a movie basically. And then the other one was the song at the end when they were all getting arrested, the sort of arrest montage.
And that was Leonard Cohen, I think.
Was it?
Well, there's a Leonard Cohen song, near the end. It might be that, I'm not sure.
I don't remember. Leonard Cohen, Who by Fire? Would that be it?
Probably.
There was also, I don't know the song.
Yeah.
But there was a kind of soulful.
Yes.
Ruefulness.
Well, you see, for me, like, the songs that I recognize, I recognize Jim Morrison's voice. So there was a Doors song, there was a Leonard Cohen song,
Peace Frog, the Doors song.
There was an Elvis song, and I thought, how bizarre to have all of these songs, from the 60s. Yeah, like, like not even like a contemporary track of some kind, or maybe something. Something that these kids like to listen to. I think
there were songs kind of from the time as well that they you got snatches of on the radio, sort of rap. I mean, that's quite interesting, I suppose. The kind of the hip hop. I think there was NWA and Ice Cube and things, which was, I suppose, a little bit before their time still, but because this was set in 2003, 2004. but there is that kind of not cultural appropriation, but just sort of aspiration of, well, rap has this kind of aspirational thing of working your way through your music out of a bad situation into a better one. But also that thing of like, so there's that aspect, and also white middle class kids listening to rap by underprivileged black people has a kind of, I mean, it's very common, but it has an element of sort of like aspiring to be kind of worse off than you are in a way. Like there's cachet in
to
that.
be bad, and to be transgressive, and to be rich.
But there's like cachet in sort of like they are in positions of privilege where they have opportunity and they have their lives basically sorted out for them. They have families that are for the most part together, and they have dinner with their parents every night. And listening to rap, which portrays a world in which that is fractured and not guaranteed, so to sort of imagine yourself in that world gives you kind of cachet, like you're in a good place and you want to imagine yourself in a worse place because... Do you see what I mean?
I see what you mean, but again, I don't agree with you. I think you're missing the attractions of that world, which is, one of danger, but also one of wealth and celebrity and, and self-expression. So I can see the desire for it. I understand the desire for it amongst, kind of America's white middle classes. It's a thing. Kind of,
yeah, but there's like a living vicariously thing of like these guys' music is all about building themselves out of where they were, working their way out of where they were, and then showing off the great wealth and girls and everything they've obtained through it. And so the living vicariously is we kind of already have basically that. We've never had to work for that. We've had it given to us because that's just the way we are.
No, but come on, it's very different to to be a middle class kid at university, which is a comparative privilege, or to be as wealthy as Beyonce or something,
Yeah, but I'll be honest. Well, yeah, this was 2003 though. I mean, this was not quite of that sort of ultimate superstardom at this point. Like I think there is a thing of like wanting to live vicariously through someone who has achieved.
Sure.
Whereas you haven't. You had it given to you. And it's like feels.
Well, I think with music,
disappointing to have just had it already.
The music that people are attracted to, or the music that they feel expresses them in ways that they can't articulate for themselves. So and those are complex things.
Yeah.
So. Some things are things that you might not be able to do, but that you want, and and so on and so forth. And I think the wealth and the celebrity and the rebelliousness and kind of, I mean, these are basically good kids that we see in this film, right? The film goes out of its way to show you that, really. So I can, and what they want is precisely that sense of excitement and danger and. With a big payoff at the end, so it makes sense. But actually, I must say I didn't notice that music.
Well, I didn't recognise any songs in particular, but there are snatches that you hear them listen on the radio.
Right.
I mean, when they're in when they're sort of pissed off, or no, sorry, it's before the first heist. It's when they're very nervous, and the one puts on the radio and something comes on. I don't remember what it was, but it was hip hop, and then the other turns it off because he's just like, "Fuck, man, we need to concentrate."
Right.
But like I think the thing about music is like, it's not about expressing who they are, but expressing something they would like to be. Rather like the movies, imagining themselves in a different situation.
I think for me the problem is that all of the boys are a cliche. All of the young men are a cliche. They're not given complex enough inner lives. So basically you have the two slackers, one who just doesn't want to be an athlete, the other one who kind of wants to be an artist, right, but is not really, a go-getter, and then you have the yuppie jock, and then you have like, the guy who's studying accountancy who's a great chess player, right, like, that's it, really.
They are one-line characters.
That's
descriptions.
Right. So which makes this playing of, this the real person versus the fictional person kind of redundant, because you know, you're given so little insight into who they are that, you know, whatever you can make of like the contrast between the real and the fictional is like spurious, really. And you know, in relation to the music, it's just what I noticed, you know, was 60s music.
Yeah.
And I just thought it's weird. I mean, to have chosen one song, you know, that might be very meaningful and play well with the scene is one thing, but to have chosen so many songs makes it seem, you know, part of a pattern that made me think, why? You know?
Yeah, I guess in a way that seemed interesting to me. It seemed like something I recognised in a way as well, because I sort of remember when I was their age, I didn't really give a fuck about new music, and I still don't. But I would listen to some, and I would listen to kind of music that I'd listened to from sort of 5 or 10 years ago when I was a teenager growing up. But also I would listen to a lot of 60s and 70s music, and I know actually the cliche to me in a teen movie, which this has elements of, the cliche to me is that the film dates itself by playing music of the time. Right. And saying like, these kids are just listening to the latest popular track that you've heard that is available on CD, and actually it like that they might be listening to classics or older music was really realistic to me.
Right.
It's like kids who grew up in the 90s saying, you know, music was better in the 70s, man, as if they were there, and as if actually it was, because all it is that they've just heard the hits, and the hits always sound better.
I think there's a thing here about, you know, them being familiar with their parents' music, you know. Anyway, I just thought to make it consistently 60s music seemed kind of odd, that's all. You know, because, I mean, even if you listen to old music, you know, you could have a track from the 40s or 50s or, you know, 70s, but like to have these key songs that are overlaid, yes, because they're not incidental, they overlay scenes, these songs. Yeah, and to have them all be 60s, I just found odd and interesting, but odd in the sense that I can't quite find the answer to my question of why.
Yeah. It's an interesting one.
Anyway, we should wrap it up. I think we've been talking for quite a long time.
Yeah, so a film that I didn't really particularly enjoy in the cinema, and I think has a lot of problems, and I think is boring for a long time because it's just, I think it concentrates on doing the wrong thing for a long time.
Yes.
But some of the stuff underneath, and some of the stuff that comes out in the portrayal of what young men's lives are like these days, and what their inner lives might be like, their aspirations or their lack thereof, was interesting to me and has come out through discussion.
Well, for me, it's a film that I can see being praised for being formally experimental, and actually I think all of those things that it's being praised for, that it might be praised for, are actually something that to me is a problem in the film. That it's like a trick. It's like, you know, you're showing off your goods or your skills, but actually kind of you're not making very much with them.
It's not as clever as it thinks it is in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's obviously kind of skilled and imaginative in wanting to do these things, but actually kind of what it does with them is rather banal.
And like all films with American in the title, it kind of feels like it wants to be important.
Yes.
Every film that's American something.
Well, it is definitely making a statement about American masculinity. Yeah. And I think, you know, it's a very...
But it's just that self-regard aspect.
Yeah, it's not a very complex statement that it's making.
No, probably not.
I don't think. So,
but I suppose it speaks to its time in a way, and I think that's interesting. In a way that I think the films that it's referencing also spoke to their time in a way. You know, Fight Club spoke to its time, that late 90s, that middle-class, white-collar, repressed masculinity.
Well, but interestingly, Fight Club, was not a success, and it got very, very mixed reviews. And, you know, I think it's a great film. This is nowhere near that standard, really. And so, you know, kind of whether it does speak for its time or not, I mean, we'll see kind of what kind of a box office it gets, and you know what kind of an afterlife it kind of evolves. I suspect there won't be much of one.
No, you can see you can see people taking it to heart though. I mean, I suppose another thing something that I wanted to bring up actually, which I'm glad you sort of reminded me, is that, which we've talked about kind of obliquely, is that the films that American Animals is referencing are very much those kind of staples of 20 and 30 something white guys,
Yes.
kind of classics.
Yes.
You know, so Tarantino is referenced all throughout, and Fight Club, and The Matrix. He talks about Red or Blue Pill and Ocean's
Yes.
11. Which are, you know, these are all like, if you see lists of, you know, like white guys recommending movies, it's like, oh, have you seen Fight Club? It's really good.
Yes.
You know, as if no one's seen it. And this film sort of sits amongst them, I think. I can imagine it becoming one of them.
Yes.
I can imagine people in sort of 10 years going, you know, there's this film American Animals, it's fucking great, but they will all be white guys saying that.
I don't even imagine that. I think the film is not enjoyable enough, actually.
No.
You know, for it to become that kind of film.
But I think the formal stuff is as you say, it's kind of a trick. It will kind of hoodwink people into thinking it's better than it is.
Yes, I think.
Or seeing the wrong side of it. Like I say, the other side of it, the other stuff, is interesting, and the stuff that is like screaming for your attention is not as good. But that's what I think would sort of hoodwink you. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
I'm just having a quick look at the box office. I don't know its budget. Who knows what the budget was? I imagine very, very cheap. But domestic total so far is $2.8 million, which is very little.
Yes, it is.
It's a film for co-production, so one would imagine it didn't cost a huge amount. But
no, I would imagine just from that its budget would be around 5 or 6 million.
Yeah, so its box office is around 2.8 to 3.2 million at the minute, it looks like. But it's early doors, right? It's only just come out. But it is destined to be sort of a smaller release, like it's from Sundance, isn't it? Well, that's where it had its premiere.
That's it. I think it's the reviews in Sundance that made it get the kind of national release that we're seeing here at the moment.
All right, it would have been more limited otherwise, do you reckon?
Yes, I mean, my understanding, just, you know, briefly from when I was looking at the credits, is that it made a huge impression at Sundance.
Actually, I must say, I've just checked the release date. The release date here is September the 7th, which it's the 10th now, so it's been out here for 3 days. But back in June, it was released in the States, June 1st. So in the States, it's probably not playing anymore.
Yeah.
It's already had its release.
So actually, part of the release here might be some kind of quota about British films.
Well, I mean, who knows? Well, with a film that is smaller and less likely to get a big audience, you can see it having a more staggered release. A kind of film that plays an art circuit does have a more staggered release, rather than, you know, like Avengers is never going to be released in one country here and then 3 months later in another country.
No,
So
the staggered release thing I get.
Yeah.
You know, but I think it's just very interesting that this film is being released in Cineworld. Right? It's not being, you know, we didn't see it at some little art house cinema. I see what you mean. So
that's where you think there might be a quota aspect of, like, we've got to play a certain number of British films. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe they just thought there's a bit of an audience for this, you know. And also it has had good press, and so that will have boosted the kind of company's optimism.
Yes. Anyway, I'm very glad we saw it.
Yeah, so am I.
And yeah, I think it is worth seeing, actually.
Oh yeah, so I think it's really worth seeing. That's for sure. It's an interesting movie.
Yes, it's a very interesting film. Even though, you know, I've voiced nothing but criticisms, I'd still recommend that people go see it.
Yeah.
All right, so we are eavesdropping at the movies, and you can catch us on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, WordPress,
Facebook, Twitter. Please like, share, and subscribe. All of that stuff that you're supposed to say.
Yes, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, good.